All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Don't know if we customarily do an invocation or pledge allegiance at a special meeting like this. Anybody know? No? Okay. We'll skip straight to the budget workshop.
Okay, alrighty, so you've got there in front of you the proposed budget for this next fiscal year. So this will be running July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. And I apologize, this should say draft there as a watermark on the front of it. I don't know how that got lost in translation, but this is just a draft, so by no means we're not asking for a finalized copy today. But and then what you've got in front of you physically is just some talking points and a summary of what we're going to go over today. Mm-hmm. So the way we set up the budget is we've got our operating revenues and then our operating expenses, and then within each operating expense is a department. And so I thought we'd kind of start there and go through each of the departments just a little bit to get you a little more familiar with them. We can go through that pretty quickly, and then we'll move on from there. So first department on there is 2, that's administration. So
I do not. I do need one. I was looking through my email.
Of the little talking points, Paul?
No, I've got the talking points.
yeah, that's what we're going through.
Do you want a copy of the budget? I copied mine
Yes.
on it.
Yes, please.
You want to take this one and run it through the machine for him?
There's one right there.
Oh, he's prepared.
You've got one for him, or it needs to copy.
Nope, that'll be
Oh,
fine.
perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, we're on page, kind of going to start on page 5 here. This is page 6. This is where we'll have our full summary of the budget and then compare it to last year's budget to kind of see how it compares. But so anyways, Department 2 is administration. That all kind of reports up to the general manager, and that's going to include things like wages and training for supervisors, our Murmur insurance, professional services, economic development, office utilities and supplies here at the warehouse, things like that. Next one on there is information technology. It's Department 5. That would be Matthew Jones, who oversees that department. That's going to include things like software subscriptions, some hardware things, our IT maintenance and support, things of that nature. Department 10 is SCADA. That's our supervisory control and data acquisition. Mark Hickerson is the supervisor of that department. That includes our 24/7 monitoring of key BPW processes and facilities, and then all of our different SCADA operators, their wages and any training is in there. Department 11 is customer accounts, and that would be Emily Dexheimer, who's the supervisor there. That's all of our CSR, wages and training, the girls out front here that take phone calls and things like that. Postage, customer bill, prep costs, all of our sales taxes and transfer fees are all in there. And so, again, these are the expense side of things, but with sales tax and transfer fees, those are also budgeted within revenues as those offset to zero for us. Department 12 is meter reading. Gene Majors is the supervisor of that department. This would just be the meter crew, the 3 people in that department, their wages and uniforms. Department 21 is electric distribution. So that's Jared Stewart is the supervisor. This is going to include power supply and transmission, all of the different linemen and their wages and uniforms. Our right-of-way maintenance, which is our tree trimming costs, are in there, and then any vehicle expenses as part of the electric fleet, and then any materials and maintenance of the actual electric distribution system. We'll talk about purchase power costs a little bit later on, which is by far the most significant expense in the budget. Department 30 is our non-cash items. So that's basically just depreciation and amortization costs for each of the fund's assets. Department 31 would be maintenance. Again, Jared Stewart's oversees that department. That does include electricians and then also our maintenance mechanics that perform all of our service on our our equipment and our facilities here. I believe there's 2 or 3 guys in that department. Department 41 is water distribution. That's Gene, again, who's the supervisor. So this would be our actual water crew, their wages, uniforms, vehicle expense, and then any materials and maintenance that's needed to maintain the water distribution system. Department 50 is debt service. So that's just the interest and fees portion of each fund's debt. We have amortization schedules for each of our debt issuances. And so all the interest costs would be included in that budget. And let's see, I think I put that in there somewhere. Just so you know, our current debt issuances that are out right now, we have the diesel generator lease purchase fund, which is from 2017. We have our 2015 water SRF, which is state revolving fund revenue bond, our 2019 water GAC facility revenue bond, and then our 2020 sewer revenue bond, which was the refunding of the 2013 bond that you might recall. And then lastly, the stormwater interfund loan from the electric fund. So basically electric fund to stormwater fund. Those are the outstanding debt issuances that we currently have, and their interest costs are all ran through Department 50. So in Department 51 is water treatment. And really Matt Munslinger oversees that department mainly. That would be our water filter plant guys, their wages, uniforms, training, the chemicals that are needed to maintain the treatment system, utility costs over there, and then obviously our GAC maintenance and replacement would all be ran through that budget. 61 is stormwater, also Matt. This one's the one that doesn't really have a revenue source right now, and so the budget for that one is a little bit light. That includes some of our stormwater coordination and some of the professional services to continue to assess the stormwater system. 71 is sewer collection. Supervisor is Matt there. That'd be our sewer crew. Their overall wages, uniforms and training, vehicle expenses, and then materials and maintenance of the sewer collection system. 81 is sewer treatment, which would be our wastewater treatment guys. Jeff Williams is the supervisor of that department. Again, that's their uniforms, training, any chemicals they need in that wastewater treatment process, biosolids disposal, and any utility costs. Lastly, we have Department 90, which is fringe benefits. That would be anything like our employer taxes, the portion that the HBPW is responsible for, retirement plan, contributions, medical, dental, insurance, and all those various items. So you take all of each department's expenses, and those are all rolled up into a consolidated view, which is what you see in the monthly board financial packet. And so when we go through the budget here, you'll see each of those departments broken out and then also allocated out among electric, water, and sewer. So we're definitely more than welcome when we kind of open it up to questions a little bit to go through any of those in detail if you wish. But that's kind of the overall summary of each of the departments. So our budgeting process, kind of the way that we put this thing together is we start with our revenues. And so revenues are the money that we take in, the money we make. And so we base these right now, our current process is to base these on a trailing 12-month actual. Basically it's impossible to predict weather patterns and things like that. And so, using your most current data is going to obviously include your most current customers, your most current headcount, citizen base, things like that. And so without being able to predict the weather year to year, that's kind of the way we've done things. In the future, we would look at maybe getting more towards a true model that would kind of normalize some of those factors, maybe over a 3 or 5 year period to get maybe a little bit more accurate. But right now, this is the way we do it, just based on the most recent 12 months of data that we have. And so in this year's budget, we don't have any proposed rate increases at the moment. And our revenues do reflect seasonal variations. We have what we call our shoulder months or our lighter months that would you know, we wouldn't expect there to be as much revenue in some of the cooler or less, basically not your winter, your summer months is what I'm trying to say there. So what you'll notice here with our revenues there on page 6 is about a little over $1 million decrease in the electric fund. And really, that's the only exception when you compare it to last year. Water and sewer are both pretty consistent. And the main reason for that decrease there, you can see in that industrial services line item, is about $800,000 of that decrease. So like I said, that's based on our trailing 12 months of data. There is an assumption by us as management here that some of that might be driven by COVID. You know, some of your industrial customers probably weren't operating necessarily at their full capacity last fiscal year. You know, we don't know that for sure, but that's a pretty normal assumption that we can make. And so what we've done for fiscal year 22 is we're going to go ahead and just kind of keep that 12-month data and keep that in there just because there is so much uncertainty still out there with COVID and what it's going to do to our industrial customers. So that is a conservative approach. We would definitely admit that. And so, but I think it's always better to probably be conservative rather than try to make an estimate that might be way too risky or something like that. So that's why the amount is so much lower there in the electric fund. So really, like I said, on the revenue side of things, that's really the biggest change. Everything else is really consistent. We've definitely seen some normalization in the water and sewer funds as far as the revenues that are coming in. Any questions so far on operating revenues or anything like that?
You guys?
No, it makes sense to do it that way, and if usage increases, then costs shouldn't really increase other than paid power, and that'll just induce a little more net profit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, and this is a full year now into having the new water facility, and so we have, you know, there could still be some fluctuations there, but we've got a little bit of a better idea of those costs and how to budget for them, and so those are kind of built in there as well. So now getting on down into the operating expense section. So I mentioned all of the department supervisors above. So basically our process is to meet together. And what we do is we take fiscal year to date, so as of February of 2021, actual expense data, and then we annualize that to basically say, what have we spent so far, and what does that project onto the entire fiscal year, the entire 12 months? And then we compare that to what we actually budgeted for that fiscal year, and then we also compare it to last year's actual data, so fiscal year 2020. And so that kind of gives us a baseline of, you know, where did we get this budget number? Are we close? If we're not, why are we so far off? You know, was there something significant that was unexpected? Did something break down and we had to buy a certain amount of material that we didn't expect, things of that nature? So basically, were there any anomalies that would have made this budget a lot higher? And then we kind of talk about next year and looking ahead. Are there any anomalies that we might expect next year? For example, the water GAC facility obviously brought on some additional expense that wasn't there before, and so we'd budgeted for that, and some of those costs are now coming in, and you know, realizing we're pretty close to budget, but maybe a little high on certain things, and so adjusting that for those different anomalies. Head count, are we planning on adding somebody in that department, taking somebody away, that kind of thing. So going through each department's basically their plans for next year and how that's going to change. And so going through there really wasn't anything drastic. You know, we did some moving around of headcount in some departments with some of the recent changes and things of that nature. But overall, we had a pretty good budget, we think, from the past fiscal year. And so it was relatively simple to kind of build off that and use that as a baseline. So in those discussions, we did assume some general inflation 1.74% is what the Department of Labor has as their 10-year CPI average. So kind of a general 1.5% to 2% inflation is pretty normal. It could be higher than that this next year. We don't necessarily know at this point. But when it comes to wages, there is a 3% increase in all wages for union employees. That's based off of our MOU with the union. So that was pretty easy to budget that in there. And then non-union employees, we kind of based on that on normal COLA adjustments and performance adjustments and things like that. So we definitely took a very close look at that. So total wages did increase by about 7.6%, and the primary reason for that is those increases that we talked about, and then we did add into our budget some employees. We've got the new community and customer coordinator position that would not have been there last year, a utility engineer position that's currently posted, and then an IT technician position as well. And then the general salary increases we talked about. So some other assumptions, purchase power costs are based on our actual megawatt hours brought to town, and then the actual MISO prices and Prairie State expenses. We've got a section on that here in just a little bit that we'll dig more into that. So you've got your revenues at the top, that's the money you bring in, and you've got all your expenses, all the money that goes out, and that gives you your bottom line, which is your net income. And the results that we're projecting for next year's budget for that is a company-wide net income of about $1.8 million. So if you were to add that $1 million back in from the electric fund that we're projecting as a decrease, we'd be right about the same as last year's budget, which was about $3 million net income. So that's the primary reason for the lower projection this year. So we're just going to have to see how that kind of shakes out and keep an eye on it. So you've got your net income, revenues less your expenses, and then where you go from there is you add back your depreciation. That's a non-cash item, so it wouldn't be affecting our cash flow at the end of the year, and so you have to add that back. And so you'll see that's an add back there on page 6. And then you take away your capital projects, so your capital spending that you expect to spend on capital projects for the next year, and then any debt principal. And debt principal would be, obviously with our debt issuances, you have a principal portion and an interest portion. And we talked about that interest portion is in Department 50, and then your debt principal is kind of down here as a decrease to cash. And so basically net income is your revenues less your expenses, like I said, add back depreciation, less capital, less your debt principal. That gives you your overall cash contribution, which is the amount that we would expect to basically put in the bank at the end of the year, if you will. So you can kind of see how that shakes out there on that page 6. So last year's company-wide cash contribution was about $1.1 million, and this year we're about $906,000. So not a very big difference there. The main reason for the lower amount is obviously due to that lower net income to start with. And then you can see there, we'll point out in the water fund, a negative cash contribution that we're projecting. So basically the reason for that is due to debt principal costs went up about $300,000. And that's because the water GAC facility principal payments haven't started yet, and those will start this next fiscal year in January of 2022. And so you can see the negative amount there. Now, the way we have our cash reserve policy is to kind of build that in anticipation of that debt service payment that's going to be added on. And so we do have some leeway that we've built into the reserves in anticipation of that cost. And so kind of on the way the reserves are set up, it's adequate to be able to service those payments for this next fiscal year. So So yeah, that's something that we'll keep in mind as the year goes on to kind of see how the water fund is doing, because, if that were to go drastically south or the other direction, it would be something that we would want to monitor to make sure we're definitely adequate enough to be able to service that new debt payment. So any questions then so far on the expenses or any of those add back items that kind of lead to that overall cash contribution line item?
No, you're doing fine, Paul.
Okay, so then, real quick here, the purchase power costs, we kind of wanted to make sure that you're comfortable with that. It is by far the most significant expense in the budget, about $15 million overall. And so those costs are based on a few things, and they are seasonally adjusted. Most of these costs are just an annual cost, and then we divide it by 12 throughout the fiscal year. But with the purchase power costs, we do have a little bit more data that we're able to use to be able to seasonally adjust those. And so you'll see differing amounts. And I'm sorry it's so small on there, but this is page 8. So this would be page 8, Department 21, so kind of towards the bottom, it's those top 6 line items, starting with Prairie State Energy Sales. And so again, those six items would add up to about $14 million of our budget. And so basically what we're showing there, so your Prairie State Energy Sales, you can see is a negative number. That's basically money that we get, so it's actually a revenue item. So that's any energy that's generated by the Prairie State plant that's sold back into the market would come back to us as a credit. So we would actually be receiving cash for that, which would be why it's a negative. So that directly offsets with Prairie State Capacity and Prairie State Energy, those 2 line items. Those would be the actual costs that it would take to run the plant, and those would be both the power costs that Prairie State is paying, as well as the fixed costs, like their debt service, labor, maintenance, things like that, that are built into that. So the offset there is around $6 million is what we kind of expect year to year between Prairie State's costs and then what we get back as a credit for their energy sales. And so then wholesale energy purchases, that's our actual, the biggest cost then for us as far as purchase power. That's the power we're actually going out and purchasing on the market from MISO. And so that's on there. And then MISO transmission is included in that. That's the transmission side of it. And then generation capacity, you can see is 0 for this year. We don't currently have any capacity contracts for generation for this coming fiscal year. Other factors that we used for the budget, we base some of our energy purchases on the last 3 years actual megawatt hours that were brought to town, and so that's basically just the last 3 years of data and the load that it requires for us to be able to service our customers. And so then also included in that is some of the actual prices in the FTR and ARR financial transmission right and auction revenue right values in the MISO marketplace. Also basically what it's costing us to buy power out in the market. And then these FTR and ARR values are some of the benefits that we get from having certain capacity or things like that within MISO. Our summer peak block contracts are included in there. The only one we have right now is with Nextera, and that's through September of 2022. So that's something that we'll definitely be visiting here in the next few months. Probably not until maybe next summer or so when we start to visit that again. But that basically sets it's a hedge that basically sets a certain price during the summer months to kind of offset some of those higher costs that we'd have to go out and purchase out on the marketplace. So it hedges that risk essentially for those months. Actual MISO transmission prices that show up are included in there. And then we talked about Prairie State. And then just so you know that the Prairie State cost is averaged about $64 a megawatt hour for the last 3 full fiscal years, low of about 63, high of about 65. So pretty consistent and not too difficult to budget for. So definitely purchase power costs are the most significant portion. So I did want to go over that. But other than that, I think everything else is pretty straightforward, but definitely, unfortunately, we're only able to get this to you yesterday, but hopefully you got maybe a little bit of a chance to go through some of it. And I didn't know if you had any questions, and at the very least, at least gives you a couple weeks before we actually go to approve the budget at the board meeting here in April. But any questions you have, feel free to go ahead and ask.
Paul, where are the pole attachment revenues accounted for?
Certainly. Those would be, it falls under miscellaneous income on page,
Yeah, I see.
yes.
Has it gone up for any reason?
Yeah, so we do our charter pole attachment billing once a year. And so that one wouldn't change too much. But then we are billing Rawls County electrical this year. So that would have, I don't think we billed them. Well, they didn't have any pole attachments that they had in the past, that we didn't have an agreement with them. And so that has been put into place. And so we'll be billing them for those attachments. As far as pole attachments, that would be the only reason it would have gone up. But and that would have been,
There's no pole attachment for Sheraton Valley, is there?
yeah, no, I don't.
They're doing everything
That
underground.
I'm aware of, I think they're all pretty much underground.
Yeah. So. And AT&T, do they pay pole attachment?
No,
We do not.
no, we've got,
It was a 50-50 deal
Yeah.
when AT&T and the Board of Public Works basically was kind of conceived at the same time. We got on their poles, they got on our poles.
Oh,
And it was, early 1900s agreement.
Okay.
Situation.
Yeah, and really AT&T's kind of getting out of the pole business. I mean, they've went
Yeah, they
pretty
don't
much
want
underground, and so they're not even set up for the infrastructure anymore. So a lot of that's getting inherited by the local municipal utility or the IOU or whoever's providing other services there.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I don't have any more. That seems to make a lot of sense.
Bill?
Just kind of a operations. This is an overview. Do you want to, are we going to go through by department, or do you want to, what's your plan?
we certainly can, yeah. That was a very high level, like you said.
Yeah.
And so basically with each department, we went through it at a very high level. And so, yeah, if we want to drill down and go through, that would, we can certainly do that. There's
Well, I know budget meetings can drag out a long time if you get into the weeds, and I don't want to do that. But as I went through it just briefly a couple of hours ago, so I just kind of highlighted a few things that brought questions to my mind. I know they've been resolved. It's just a matter of, hey, have we talked about this? Is that how you want to proceed? I don't know. Again,
If you've got questions, Jeff, by all means.
Tell you the truth, Bill, it's your guys' study session, and so we're kind of open to whatever you guys want to discuss.
Well, I do
and we'll
appreciate
cover anything. So
appreciate the overview. It's good to see the view from 5,000 feet, or whatever it is, to see how it's been developed. I kind of had an idea about that. And I know with departments, you have long discussions about where to move those funds or potential funds each year. And I guess my questions come up are, okay, was this thought of, or how was this number developed? Mm-hmm. Again, I don't want to drag it into the weeds. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Just flip through a few sheets here. just quickly, because, I don't want to dwell on it necessarily. It's just kind of, have we done? One of the things under electrical, I noticed alcohol and drug testing is 0. Physical vaccines, I assume that's not being done, or the vaccine kind of issue has gone away.
That's actually we have a new contract with it's called Be Well. It's an
Okay.
employer contract that is, so that alcohol and drug testing used to be paid for out at the hospital. And now that that's included within our contract, we don't have to pay that anymore. And so I believe that contract is through December, December of 2022. And so for this entire next fiscal year, we won't have to pay any of that.
Okay, but it is covered. There's something out there happening. is
Yes,
what you're
yeah, we
saying.
still
Okay,
do the
good.
monthly and I think, monthly testing.
Jared and I had a couple of conversations about long-term thinking about electric vehicles, charging stations. What's the other one? Solar type of activities. Jared, you want to touch on those, or should we just blow through that and stay in the study stage? I mean, how does it affect the budget this year is kind of the question.
We kind of stay in a study stage. I think Ken I spoke to him about it a little bit too. It's one of those things, past boards we've approached, previously about, charging stations. And the past direction was let the open market drive that. And we're working on, the whole grain belt. We're pretty committed on power on that, which kind of drives our ability to bring on more generation. And Ken can allude a little bit more.
Yeah, Bill, I think the one thing is on the charging stations, I think we're seeing a really good thing from Tesla, and I think we're going to see more charging stations rolled out by the market. It's one of those technologies that's hard to chase, because as manufacturers change the type of charging stations and the rapid charge that they want, I think we need a little bit more clarity on, where some of these entities are going. You're seeing a drastic change right now within the automobile industry, the electric vehicles that they're rolling out. And
I guess where I'm coming from is, I saw the report this week about $1 billion being placed in the federal budget under the Emergency Cares Act, or whatever you want to call it. And us being in a position to say, we've got some plans ready here when those funds are granted or available. It's the shelf-ready stuff. And it's just talking points at this point. Sure. But if we had some money in the budget that said, okay, we've got a preliminary concept design here for a charging station, wherever it lands.
Well, we do have professional service contracts in place that we can use through, and if it's something that a direction board wants us to go, we can use some of our professional service contracts to try to at least get us 3/4 of the way there.
I guess my fear is that, they, 6 months from now, they said, okay, we've got, $3 million that we can spread around this kind of part of the country. Send it to us, here's our plan.
Yeah, there's still a lot of VW money out there too, in that $8 billion settlement that they had, that it was kind of just pushed around all the states, and there were certain locations that were kind of, quote unquote, the best locations to start putting these stations. It's not really in our hands on that end. We've sat through, how many meetings we sat through, Matthew? Trying to get one of those, that money in the hands of Hannibal. And they're going mostly third party companies and building these units in these certain areas.
Yeah. Again, it comes under this infrastructure talk that's happening out there, and they're just going to pitch some money at it pretty quickly, I think. And I just want us to be in a position that says, okay, we're ready. We've been planning this, and the cost analysis is, well, if they're going to dump enough money, they being the feds or MoDOT, then we start to balance that cost benefit ratio kind of thing. It's just a question at this point. I know we have talked, and we could talk all afternoon about that concept, but it's just, if we have funds available for that kind of planning, then I think it behooves us. I don't know, John, what do you think? You think that,
Well,
I'm not specifically throwing a dollar out there, I'm
Oh,
just,
sure.
you're anticipating something possibly happening and we don't know what it would be. Being prepared for it would make sense. And if it happens mid-fiscal 2022, then, it's a found Easter egg and it'll be accepted. And I don't think we can really budget for it right now.
all you could budget for is planning. In other words,
Yeah.
if you've got to hire a consultant for some money or if we can do it in-house even. I don't know if that's possible, but it's that kind of pre-planning.
Yeah. The one thing that could go part of the planning process is actually just, I'm kind of a fan of designated accounts, or designating the funds, not necessarily maybe budgeting for the expenditures. But, with the Rescue Act and the Infrastructure Act, I think that's one thing we were trying to discuss there quite a bit yesterday, for water and stormwater. How is the funding going to get allocated out? And then what's the process that they're going to be utilizing? Because I think everybody's still trying to figure that out. But, is there going to be a local match or not? And then how do you go ahead and put that a part of your planning process so that you have the funding set aside? And then what steps would be necessary from an engineering design standpoint? Obviously, charging stations is going to be market driven to some standpoint with us providing the infrastructure to serve it. So I think you'll see the marketplace probably engineer and design the service part of it, and then us being in a position to be able to supply the electrical part, kind of very similar to what we've done with Casey's and Tesla, where they come in and say that this is the type of charging station we'd like to see for our vehicles. And it's just a matter of us getting the service there for them to be able to put it in the locations and stuff. But
Yes, what Jared and I have talked a little bit about is a demonstration. In other words, we control our own expenses, our own overhead, our own, purchasing. And that demonstration could be even a fleet vehicle that we utilizing that charging station that we create. Say, okay, we start to get a handle on what those expenses and real costs are over time. If it's another 5 years, that's okay. And it's going to be a loss leader until you start to get some volume in there. But then we know, Paul would know expenses on a specific vehicle or two, as well as the development of a small charging station. And if the feds are going to help us pay for that, that seems to me to be something that could be planned for.
And really, it'd be a very good initiative for the city and us to do it together, on what, if you're talking about internal fleet, what internal replacements and vehicles would you might think that electric vehicle would be a good supplemental or change out to it? We've got, most of our vehicles, are going to be, obviously heavy duty line trucks and crew trucks. But at some point, trucks and sedans and some of those things might make sense to, instead of going back with a gasoline vehicle, go back with an electric vehicle and put a charging station, somewhere. But, really the philosophical approach would be kind of different depending on whether you're looking at your internal fleet versus somebody traveling to the community versus somebody actually having a charging station at their home, which would be great, if more and more people purchase electric vehicles, from a utility standpoint. So.
But Jared, you said that any organized charging groups would be a third-party company, and we would just be effectively obligated
We
to
just
supply
effectively
power.
serve them, kind of like Tesla.
Yeah.
Just effectively serve them. It was 3 years ago, we talked about looking into purchasing a couple charging stations and putting downtown next to the bathrooms right there across from the, is that the trailhead? Is that what that's called? Right there across from the Pops Club area, on the volleyball area. And we done some investigation. At that time, it was around $100,000 for 2 charging stations. There was 2 fast charging stations, and then we had to build a line there. And me and Heath and they presented it to the board, and the board, direction they wanted to go was to allow it to progress and allow third party to go ahead and facilitate that. So that's kind of where we left it at that time. We didn't know really design or any of that stuff. All we did was just researched on available charging stations and what was going on in open market. We was looking at one Tesla fast charger, not the supercharger, because they're much more expensive. But one fast charger and then one normal everyday car that works for like the Hondas. And then we did look into possibly purchasing a small sedan car, and our local dealers currently are equipped to service them. So if we ever had an issue where it was like a non-move issue, then we had to tow it to, at that time, was St. Louis or Winsfield was the closest place. Now there's some places in Columbia and St. Louis, but still no dealerships in this area that service them.
I think the real opportunity is out here at 61, even, where the Buckhorn sign is out here, right in front of our building. We're that close to 61 where the volume is, they're going to app that stuff. That's all going to be apped pretty soon. Where can I recharge? That seems, just in our own neighborhood is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How do we capture that as a demonstration? I'm not saying doing a full-blown station. So that we're in a position to take advantage of it. And there's some economic development stuff there too. Hey, we're at least ahead of the curve. But, I'm just looking at a couple of my quick notes here. This is under capital projects. I see we have vac truck listed twice. Replacement. And maybe that's just dividing one vehicle into two departments, one under water and one under sewer. Because I know those animals are pretty expensive.
Yeah, and I can let Matt speak to this. I do know that the vac truck under sewer, we are getting rid of that. There's you should have a column that has basically the total, which would be a 0 line item. So this one is now 0.
Oh, 0.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so there's a little note there that says no longer needed to fight foam. So that
Oh, okay.
Jeff and the guys out there and Matt and everybody have done a great job of going out and investigating some of the options there. The plan was to buy a vac truck to use to kind of fight some of the foam issues that they were dealing with, some of the fats and oils that weren't breaking down quite all the way. And what they did is they found a chemical instead that they've been using. I think we've talked about it maybe at past board meetings, but that is working very, very well. So we did oust the vac truck for next budget year.
Okay. I know that, do we use that for the sewer cleaning? Basically, we're getting rock out of the
We've got
sewer.
two of them we use on the sewer department for cleaning sewer mains. The one in the water budget there would be a hydro excavation unit where they can go out and dig around other utilities without damaging them. Around a meter pit where there's fiber optic lake close or a gas line. What we're doing right now is we're pulling a crew from the sanitary department, going over back and for the water department, and then having to come back. So this would be a dedicated machine.
Okay.
That could be used just for hydro excavation.
Under administration, I see a business park improvements.
That's a line item that's been out there for a while in case if there's a lot sold at the technology park or the business park.
Okay.
That's just a kind of a designated account holder, to be able to do those improvements when
And that
necessary.
would go toward our portion of that governor's cost share as well.
Okay.
That road improvement.
I just didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
That's all I had. I had some minor stuff, but nothing significant.
I noticed that there was no travel in there. We're not planning on doing any travel next year or training.
I think, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, It should all be in, we basically, what we did on that is, obviously we didn't do any travel this past year. So we
Yeah, I understand.
We took the budget before and just kind of replaced it in this next year's budget, thinking that things would ramp back. I know we've got some stuff that's coming down the pike that some people are doing a little bit of traveling, and I don't know that it'll get to a level of where we were, but I think the option will be there to attend virtually for quite a while. So I don't think it'll be quite as high, but I think there is some dollars in the budget, and I think us as a management team definitely see the benefit in doing that and being able to get out there and speak to other municipalities and utilities and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I noticed that was one of the check marks on my, and, I'm adamant about employee training and training opportunities, including leaving the building sometimes. I mean, this year's an exception, but we don't want to zero that out so that it's for some reason assumed we're never going to do it again. It's critical that people get out there and see meet with their peers, but also get out of town a little bit to freshen their eyes about what they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I appreciate you checking on that one.
did you say it was 0 though?
I did see a couple of them marked 0 myself, and I didn't know what
where
to
was
count. It would be,
I guess,
would be under administrative.
yeah, it's under administration and supervisors.
Yeah, there's 16,000 in for that one, but like under the IT training and travel, there's nothing but.
Yeah, so the IT would be.
So Matthew's not planning on any travel and
Yeah,
training
no.
next year?
We took Matthew and we moved him under the administrative budget
Yeah.
and combined him
Okay.
there so that he's
We
not
don't
allowed
want him
do
to be
it.
a mushroom out there.
So that'd be the reason.
I did mark that 0. I saw that 0.
So the thing that came to my mind is, when I was looking at that, was that where do we group the budget for our crews going and helping other folks? Or other crews coming to help us, for that matter?
Yeah, that's another thing. I did mull that over in my mind of, do you budget that? Last year we did send some guys for a hurricane down to Alexandria. Before that, though, I think it was maybe 2 years that they went down to wherever it was you guys went.
Florida, Orlando.
And so
Disney World had, oh no.
No.
you could probably justify throwing some money in the budget for that, but it's one of those things it's so hard to predict. And
Yeah, I know. And we haven't had to call anybody here in quite some time, have we?
January.
January.
Well, I guess we did in January, didn't we?
Yeah.
well, before that though,
May 30th, or May 13th, sorry, 2013.
The one thing is on those items, Bill, if we send crews somewhere, most of the time we get reimbursed, so the cash impact or the funding impact's kind of hopefully a wash, from that standpoint, which is why it's such a good program. And then if people come here, in some ways we're budgeting for contingencies like what we had last year with Uri and the ice storms and some other things. And Paul went through covering the contingency and reserve funds that we have, and that's really kind of what they're there for. And
Yeah, it is.
it's back to sitting there saying you have to keep so much funding for your debt service, and then you have to keep so much funding for those contingencies, and then some things that we're dealing with water and getting everything acclimated to GAC and post-COVID. We're kind of using some of those funds to stabilize any rate impact to the customers and stuff. So in some ways it's flowing through the budget. It's just not as highlighted as a contingency item, but it's kind of there, So, and then on the travel and training, we've got a lot of folks in new roles and responsibilities. That's one thing we've kind of talked about, and Paul touched on it as a management team, is really over the next few years, it's going to be an important program for people to get out and get the training and development that they need and stuff. So they'll be a pretty good initiative, for the next little bit.
I did have a note here under taxes and transfer fees. And I know that's broken down. Just on your cover, it's at 1.8 million, with I think 642,000 in taxes, and the rest in transfer fees. Is that correct? I have a page number on this one, Paul. I did find the transfer fee.
Yep.
Under a couple of accounts. One's 284,000, but that's just part of it.
Yeah, it should be the sewer funds portion. So yeah, the transfer fees are about, $1.8 million, which would be the 5.5% of pretty much of revenues. And then sales tax is $642,000 for the electric fund and $125,000 for the water fund. And we don't have any sales tax for the sewer fund. It is exempt.
I guess what I was looking for is that breakdown. I think I found it, but I'm not sure the pages, but,
Oh.
it was the breakdown of the taxes and the transfer fees. We've got the total, and I was just wanting to make sure that we were aware of it.
It'd be on the Department 11, so let's find that page here. If we did it for the electric fund, it would be on page 8.
Yep.
It's going to be Department 11 is about halfway down the page. So there's transfer fee there, and then there's Missouri sales.
There it
tax.
is. Yep.
Extremely small.
Okay,
amount.
yeah. Well, that is the Missouri sales tax, yeah. Okay, that's good. So I was just trying to put those two numbers together in my head.
Yep, and then like I mentioned earlier, that is a net zero impact to us because we collect that sales tax and then.
Just on the books.
Yep.
Anybody else? John?
Well, we've got, like I said, a couple weeks for you to go through this a little bit more if you'd like, and feel free to reach out to me or any of the management team with any more questions. And then we'll actually go for approval at the April board meeting. I did want to touch on some of the capital projects. We've already went through the capital improvement plan, but just kind of as a segue, there are some items in here that could have a significant impact and swing kind of on our final budget numbers. And you can see in there on page 19. That would be all of our capital items for this next fiscal year. And so you can see the significant electrical projects that we've been discussing over the past few months are all in there. About $7.5 million or so that we do expect to obtain financing for. But there's some big question marks kind of within those projects. So if you get to that page, Man, it's small font, isn't it? E14 is the diesel generator controls for $50,000. E15 is the Indian Mound substation rebuild. And then E18 is replace electric generator at water treatment plant, which is currently showing $0. Basically, the swing, I guess, that I'm referring to there is whether or not we keep the diesel generators as part of this electrical project. And, I can kind of let Jared or even Ken kind of talk to this too, but, we have a big contingency there on, like we've talked about over at our Oakwood substation with those generators and where they sit. And we do know that they have to be moved. And as part of that, it would be $800,000 to $1 million to move them. And so obviously if that is a known factor, we need to be considering of whether or not we should go ahead and hang on to them or go ahead and get rid of them. And so that's kind of where those line items are. And basically, if we did get rid of them, obviously we wouldn't have the diesel generator controls line item, and we would have to add some dollars to replace the electric generator at the water treatment plant, as that would be needed for a contingency backup plan for there. So really, I'll probably kind of turn it over to Ken here with what we're thinking with that. But we've given you some data on that over the last few months. And
effectively, we've been kind of evaluating for several months now, 2 or 3 options when it comes to some of these electric projects. And we've got the 161 line coming in from the Finn substation. We've got the loop tie-in, the 34.5 line that's out there. So everything's kind of been budgeted. And right now, the budget is assuming that we're going to reconfigure Oakwood, to save the $1 million on construction cost. The one thing we haven't budgeted is the placement, of the generators, somewhere else. And so, we've been looking at, what would be the best option, from a reliability, economic standpoint, and overall rate impact. And so we went out and looked at what capacity would cost us in the market. We've evaluated what the generators are worth, and then we're entering into some agreements for interconnection agreements with Ameren on Oakwood and the West Side sub. But what's currently in the budget right now is assuming we're going to do some type of reconfiguration, to minimize the construction cost for the connection coming in from the 161 from Finn to Oakwood. And then kind of where we're at is the capacity markets. We're going to know exactly what the capacity markets look like mid-May. They've had the auction last week. So we'll be getting those numbers in. MISO's looking at doing some changes. We've talked several times about that, of how they capture capacity and how they give you credit for it, within Zone 5, which is what we have. And then the generators are considered behind the meter generation and stuff. So, but anyway, we're doing quite a bit of due diligence just to make sure we're making the best overall decision and not undermining reliability or resiliency, of the system and stuff. And so a lot of the improvements that we're making will enhance overall reliability. And I think we found out last winter, with the severe weather, you just really can't island yourself or plan to island yourself. So you're going to be doing it by zones. And MISO's doing, in my mind, a really good job of keeping the reliability at the forefront of how you engineer, design, and plan, to make sure that the infrastructure is there to serve, extreme conditions and stuff. So, but what you're seeing within the budget is the financing plan. And then we still got a few more things to do, in getting things bid over the next, few months. And, right now we'll probably be going out for bid and looking at maybe even acquiring, some transformers and stuff, a part of that project, even before we even have the contract signed, with Ameren, just because of the long lead times. The one thing we've kind of looked at is on the revenue side of things, of keeping the revenues flat, is recognizing maybe the supply chain is not going to get caught up anytime soon. So even if people are wanting to increase production or increase, utilization, it may be hard to do so, until we see where the post-COVID items come out. But anyway, so probably within this budget, the electric projects, getting those financed, looking at generations capacity, and then really even talking about solar and some other things, have an integrated resource plan, making sure that we've got really, really good generation resources out there. And then the one thing that's still hanging out there a little bit in the long range plan is grain belt, where that's going to end up at, because that's 15 megawatts that, for the Hannibal system is very attractive, because it's going to bring, cheaper energy from the wind turbines, out west, into this area and stuff. So, but we understand all the, property right issues that go along with that. So, but right now this budget's kind of assuming that energy is going to get here at some point, and we'll have 15 megawatts available for the community and stuff. So, but anyway, those are probably some of the, bigger decisions, is those projects. And then obviously, with the water system on the GAC side of things, we're starting to see where that's coming out at. And most of those costs are coming in underneath forecasts, but they are having a financial impact, on the budget compared to prior years. And probably GAC's added $700,000 to $800,000 with the principal payment and then the carbon change out. So those are the items that's kind of hanging out there, but what's in the plan is kind of what I've described and stuff. So that's kind of what we're setting at. So, and I'll kind of, Matt, Jared, is there anything I missed on those items, or anything we need to discuss? But those are the bigger ticket items. And then obviously with stormwater, having a funding solution for it, is one of those things that's kind of looking at, and then where do you move forward from there? So, but the budget doesn't really include any revenues or funding sources for it. But those are the contingencies, that's kind of within there.
Jared, just trying to remember, we did go ahead and purchase that property for the Indian Mountain substation, didn't we?
We did?
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw some survey work out there.
It took us a while to get it done, but yes, we did.
Yeah, I saw some survey work going on out there a while back, and
Yeah,
found out.
it was that back corner of the Lowe's property that they're not gonna use that we purchased from them.
Yeah, I found out that what they were surveying didn't have anything to do with us at all, so.
Sure.
So what department deals with the process of putting smoke down the sewers to find out if there's
Sanitary.
sanitary?
Be,
Would that be 71?
Yep.
I tell you, what, I don't know if it's just a burr that I've got, but it just seems like there should be, or could be some stormwater enhancement by virtue of trying to keep stormwater out of the sanitary sewer. And I think I mentioned this at a meeting before, that if we had a process to encourage homeowners to turn themselves in, then we would go in and make that separation, because way back when the land was put together and the underground was put together, there wasn't a differentiation between rainwater and sewer. And when you start doing the smoke tests, people are going to say, nope, nothing, no smoke in my house, because they feel like they're going to get pinched into spending a lot of money to separate their drains from their sewer, sanitary sewer. And I'm just a proponent of two things. One is separating the two so that not a lot of rainwater gets processed through the factory we've got that does the sewer. But also to have it be a supplementation of trying to figure out how to fund the stormwater by means of keeping it out of the sewer system. And I know that's kind of a vague thing, and I don't know if there's any real budget that is available to go to homeowners and say, hey, look, we have a practice now that, which I'm not saying we do, but I think we should, try to do that separation over kind of a progressive period and start with people that say, hey, I know mine's tied together, and then we go in there and jointly plow up their this to divert it to that and separate the two. That's more of a,
We've done a lot of smoke testing.
yeah.
Essentially everything east of Grand, east of Country Club,
Okay.
including South Side was done
Mhm.
back in 2014, 2015.
Mhm.
We've also done everything that would be come to West Ely and north,
Mhm.
North of 36. We did that probably back in 16 or 17. Lake Apollo area was done. Patchen Street area has been done since.
Right, but when something's identified, what's
Most of the
fixed
stuff-
typically?
I mean, the quickest thing to fix is downspouts connected.
Mhm.
And I believe we've got all those addressed in all those areas.
Okay.
The biggest one that you don't see a lot of, but they are there and they cost a lot, would be foundation drains connected. Because in a lot of these areas, there are no storm sewers to connect these foundation drains to if they can't be daylight.
Mm.
And so it'd actually be the installation of some type of sump pump system that would discharge the ground either out in the yard or out in the curb line.
Mhm.
There are a few of those that we could identify going back through all those records. But like sump pumps, the only way you find sump pumps is through home inspections. We went through that in the Lake Apollo neighborhood in 2017, 2018. And we found 19 sump pumps in that area that were disconnected.
Mhm.
We didn't offer any financial relief to them, but we gave them a grace period because it's currently against code to have sump pump connected to the sanitary sewer.
Mhm.
So once they were found, they were given 30 days to work out a plan with the building inspector, whether it be, hey, we've got to do this, it's going to, I need some money to do that, so it's going to take me 6 months, and then at the end of that period, whatever, the building inspector went back and verified that the sump pump was no longer connected. Getting in people's homes is the biggest issue with sump pump inspections, and we're able to combo that with water meter change outs is why it went so well the way the code or policy's written is this property owner is responsible from the main all the way to the house or to the building. And, you know, if it's an old clay tile service line, it may be crushed or cracked, allowing groundwater to enter.
Mm.
And there's other municipalities that have paid in areas where there's high groundwater tables. They've paid to actually have those service lines lined with the cured in place liners, or dug up if they had to be dug up, because ultimately it is impacting the works of the wastewater plant, because you're having to treat more water, costing more chemicals, more electricity, that sort of thing. So they saw the public good out of it. It's just something that we've not taken that next step on at this point. We're trying to address all the issues that we can on the public system side before we start tackling the private side issues.
So do you think the amount of rainwater getting into the sanitary is mainly from residential as a function of volume?
It depends on the river level.
Oh.
I mean, that's the wild card in all this. I mean, example would be the armory. When the armory floods, you've got floor drains that are direct connections to the sanitary sewer. So we've actually,
Are they supposed to be connected that way?
yeah, I mean, under normal conditions, yes.
Okay.
But because that building is now flooded, you've got a 4 or 6 inch connection that's a direct connection to your sanitary sewer at that point. And so we've actually talked with Jeff Kessner with Trek about the possibility of installing some type of valve on their sanitary service. And once the river reaches a certain level and they vacate the premises, that service could then be turned off. And so you don't have that direct connection to that floor drain or that toilet or that urinal. I mean, you take the Ball Diamond, several of those buildings along Colfax, that flood. I mean, those are all direct connections,
So
taking
it's
capacity up. And
Just draining all day?
Yep.
Okay,
You
yeah.
can pump as hard as you want to pump, but
Yeah.
you never catch up. We went through, we've sealed up all the manholes. We put solid concrete chimneys on them. We put bolted, gasketed lids in all of them. One of the next projects on our list is to do some lining in the area of South Main, where it used to be houses and it's clay tile pipe. So in all reality, we're probably going to line through manholes because we don't need access at this point. And when we do come back to clean or televise, we would then cut them open just in that manhole.
Is that lining done by contractor, or do we do
Lining
that?
would be done by a contractor. All we have the ability to do in-house is do a 4-foot repair. We're also exploring with Jeff Grouty. They can actually go in a clay tile line, pressure test each joint. If the joint doesn't pass the initial pressure
Like you're
test,
talking about 4-inch clay tile or bigger?
8,
Okay.
16, or 8, 10, 12, 30 inch. I mean, we've got it all in that downtown area.
Okay.
They go in, they seal it up, they pressure test each individual joint to a given pressure. If it doesn't pass, they inject the grout. It's forced out into the area around the pipe, and then they keep injecting grout until that joint passes that pressure test.
That's pretty cool.
So that's something that we're also evaluating. Jeff actually is working with, I believe it's Little Rock, Arkansas, and they had a contractor up there a couple of weeks ago, and Jeff was able to go down and visit with them about their process and their success rate and being able to seal out groundwater. So that's
So you've got some money in the budget to do some of that.
I think it's about $500,000.
Okay. Makes
We've
sense.
just been addressing the stuff we could do at this point to see the impact, and we did see that back in 2019 when the river level rose. Typically, we had to open the constructed SSO about 23, 24 feet, and it was closer to 25 feet this time because we were able to seal out enough of the groundwater that it gave us that additional capacity.
And the budget for those repairs are under Department 71?
They would be under the capital project.
Yeah, it'd be on page 20, capital projects. And then, yeah, Department 71 and
We have 250,000 in this year.
Okay.
You know, future years in the capital plan and ramps up.
Okay, so, sounds like it's definitely being addressed, thank you.
John, by the way, Pioneer was done a couple of years ago, smoke tested.
Yep.
That's why he's asking. He doesn't know what to do.
I wasn't saying that, no. I do have a question, and it really is in the budget planning process, where we went to the CPI, the Fed's number. I've always been one to question that number that's published as being way too low. Not so much for labor stuff as much as it is for purchasing. If you're out there buying material today, as the guys are, I'm sure materials are getting pretty high. So that there's a budget concern for me on that side. I'm wondering, are we going to be prepared for that kind of inflated impact? And that includes federal dollars that are rolling into everybody's bank account right now. Is that going to be, it's going to be reflected somewhere, at least in my opinion.
The one thing we've tried to do is go through and look to see what the contingencies or variances would be if bids start coming in higher, and at what point would that start creating a fiscal concern or a rate concern. So like specifically on electric, we've got so many dollars that's going to be bid over the next year or so. And so we've been kind of dealing with this issue with BHM&G and making sure that we've got good engineering estimates. And so there's some contingency dollars in those engineering estimates. But until you actually bid those projects, it's going to be hard to tell. But we have been kind of monitoring some other projects that's very similar to what we're going to be bidding, as other communities go out there. So to answer your question, Bill, it's not specifically in the budget, but we're aware of it, and it's kind of one of those things we'll kind of monitor, and until you really get your bids back in, we'll see what it looks like, and that's one thing, we were talking about the electric project specifically, and it's just a good example of that. Is hopefully we've got a good enough plan that if we start seeing increased costs or increased pricing, either through some type of financing arrangement or timeline and projects differently, we might be able to alleviate some of the financial burden, on the customers and even on our own system and stuff. But no, it's a valid concern, and one we're really trying to make sure that we've got, a rate plan in place along with the financing plan, along with the funding plan, that if bids start coming in 10, 15, 20% higher than what we're anticipating, then what are we going to do, as far as awarding those contracts and moving forward with it.
Your material suppliers are looking to make up for what they got pinched for last year, I would think.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
And commodities as a whole is up. I mean, wood was 1,000 and change for 1,000 board feet. That's the open market. That's just not. I mean, that's shelf wood. That's not markup wood to get to Lowe's and stuff like that. I mean, Bill knows. Cheap plywood now is you can't buy them really. I mean,
$40-some dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were what, 25 last year?
Oh,
Something like that?
OSB was 7.5 last year, and it's what, 33 now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't.
Copper was, trading, because I always watch copper because that's such an influence in mine. And copper was trading in the low $2 range. Now it's $4.10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you buy a substation transformer, I would venture to guess 10% of it's copper weight.
That's one thing is timing out the projects, depending on the lead time on some of it, and then getting vendors to, guarantee prices for a period of time is going to be more and more difficult. So, I mean, some of the contracts may actually have to be indexed or looked at differently rather than, just a flat bid, so. But no, it's a concern.
Okay.
I don't have anything else.
Anybody? No comments? I don't have anything else.
okay, well,
Thanks a lot, and like I said,
Thank you.
if any other questions do come up, feel free to reach out. And especially, with the diesel generator discussion, that's something, as far as those couple items that are on the capital list, that we're gonna have to either add or remove or decide what we're gonna do with here in the next few weeks. So we'll continue that discussion, and we'll definitely update you on that come next board meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Really the only other item we had, we just wanted to give you a brief update real quick on the deposit policy and those recommended changes. We've talked about it a couple months ago, and then we really wanted to wait to get through the budgeting process to see, maybe what the impact might be on reserves and everything. And so Emily's here today to kind of go over those changes. Really just an education process of what we currently do, what we're moving towards, and the benefits to the customer and stuff. So you guys can actually hear it and ask any questions before you have to make a decision, improving the policy and stuff. So
Sure.
thank you, Emily.
Sounds good.
Sure. So really, we just want to open it up, like he said, to what questions you might have. Just so you have a little background, right now, our utility deposits, when it comes to residential customers, because that's where we're looking at the change, it goes towards anyone who is renting, anyone whose name's not on the deed of the property is assessed a deposit. And it's 2.5 times the average monthly utility cost at that address, and it caps out at $400. So we're looking to kind of change that around a little bit. Some of that purpose in that is just for it to be applicable to all residential customers. So we're treating our residential class the same. It would be based on a credit rating. It would be a tiered system. It's a pretty simple process, the one that we are looking at, where basically you would get a red, yellow, or green light, $0, $200, $400. So we're still looking at the same dollar amount in that, not increasing that any. It's more of just kind of a reevaluation of where we see that risk at, and also being able to sort of back up and say, well, these people, that purpose of our deposit is to hold and to assess for risk. If there's going to be, bad debts, write-offs, collections, we want to be able to assess that and have something in place to protect us from that for when people aren't paying final bills when they move off of our system. So to be able to assess that a little more equally and following the same process for our residential customers. And in that also, it would allow us with these changes, if a customer has a deposit and then they have a 12-month excellent credit history with us, they could request for that deposit to be applied back to their account. Again, that going towards, we don't want to hold on to money that we don't need. If there's not a risk that's showing, if these people aren't showing that there's a risk to the account, we don't want to have that funding. that's not our place to do. That's not our purpose of our deposits. Right now, we kind of looked at our deposits. We have about $750,000 in deposits. Of that, there's about $280,000 of it that are residential customers who have an excellent credit history with us. So they could have been on our service for multiple years and never had as much of a penalty, and we're holding a deposit on their account. So the ability to be able to, reassess that, not keep funding that, would go back to the customer then. The process for it is a pretty simple process. We would be working with Equifax, their preferred partner with NISC, our software company. It's integrated into that system, into that service order system that is already used for signing people up for service. It'll be as easy as a click of a button for our CSRs. For that information to come back to them. And then it's going to have some benefits to it, as well as not holding assets that we may not need to. It's a good for mitigating fraud, verification of identity, especially as we move more towards online signups, having that ability for a check reference to go out. It's one thing if you come and you sit at my desk and you show me a photo ID, I can see that it is you in front of me. I don't have that ability, even though we're getting maybe a copy of your photo ID when you're signing online, we're not physically seeing you. So it's going to help mitigate some of that. With this system, with Equifax, it's also designed to identify customers who are paying their utility bills. So it looks a little bit more towards utility payment outside of overall credit. It's looking at that as well, but they have a special design where they can really look at that utility payment history. With that 12 months, us having the ability to also give you your deposit back if you have excellent credit history with us, that's another way that we can look out and, be able to go back to our customers with that. And then just managing our residential customers the same, treating them in the same way. And again, not holding more of a deposit than we need to. So with that, it's a fairly simple fix. We've done some changes to our deposit, written some changes up on that policy. The schedule of fees and charges does reference the deposit as 2 times the average monthly billing for residentials. So that's the part especially that we would need approval from you all that I believe we're going to ask for at the next meeting.
Correct. Yeah.
And then from that, we can kind of move forward with that to implement it with NISC.
So with it being the schedule of fees and charges, we just want to make sure there wasn't anything else that we were going to have to adjust with it, but it doesn't look like we do. So this is just the only topic that would be impacting that schedule.
So is that what it is currently, 2.5 times the average
Yes.
for anybody who rents?
Anyone whose name's not on the deed of the property.
Right.
So I've had people come and maybe they've owned their home for 20 years and never been late with us. And then they sell that home and they're building a new one. And for 6 months or a year, they're going to be in a rental. And then I have to charge them a utility deposit, which on the customer side is not, very friendly to them. They've proven to us that they are going to pay their utility bill in and out. And then because of our policy, we're charging them a deposit. So it will help with situations like that in particular.
Do you have any statistics or insight in the bad debt that is accumulated? Is it mainly from renters, or is it mainly from new customers or old customers? I mean, the whole point of this is to eliminate bad debt. So has any study or analysis been done on the demographics of a person that gets into a bad debt situation?
We have not done that. We don't, other than right now, if you have a deposit on your account, I know that you're a renter. If you don't, I'm assuming you're an owner. That there's no check mark owner renter in our system to sort of be able to evaluate that. I believe when this deposit policy was originally made, the thinking was an owner is more likely to be staying at the address and therefore needing utility service there. I think that was some of the background of why they decided that owners would not have a deposit on it. I know it's been the same way for at least 10 years.
You could also put a lien on a property that somebody owned.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when we looked at the numbers that, a third or more of the deposits that we're holding right now are on excellent credit paying customers, excellent paying customers. That really stuck out to me as a need to find some way to mitigate that and sort of go around that and be able to not hold on onto that funding.
So the whole motivation for this policy change is to benefit good customers and not necessarily figure out a way to mitigate bad debt.
I'd say it kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, we're going to be able to help our good paying customers, but also to me, another thing that sticks out with our online signups, and we've been looking at this since we started looking at online signups a few years ago, is being able to verify identity and to do what we can to help with identity theft. And this process will really assist with that.
So how will this policy benefit the bad debt portion? Just by identifying people who have historic bad credit?
There's certainly some motivation baked in to know that,
you know, I'm giving you this money as a deposit. If I pay well over the next 12 months, I can get this deposit back potentially. So a little motivation there. Just another overall motivation to have good credit in general. If you know that you might not necessarily have to pay a deposit if your credit meets the requirement.
Well, there's a whole layer of people who are from the whole irresponsible bad debt, whatever you want to call it, or just don't make enough money to pay their bills. And one of the practices of those type of people is get the electric put in my 10-year-old's name. Will this process totally stop that, or will it just say, if it's in my 10-year-old's, you definitely have to have a deposit?
It would. This process, because especially I would say that person may now take advantage of being able to sign online, because you don't have to show the 10-year-old's ID in front of us, so we wouldn't, as a representative taking their information. This process will be able to identify with that social security number someone who's deceased, someone who's underage, and it will send back like a fraud alert for that. It also identifies if someone's social security number is like a known fraud situation, there'll be an alert with that as well.
Is there a fee to Equifax?
There is a fee to Equifax. Paul and I have kind of put those numbers into the budget potentially for next year. It was a little hard to figure out. What we did is look at our connects and our transfers over a year's period of time. There were about 2,400 of them. I went through and sort of took out multiples and different things like that and figured out there were probably about 1,100 new customers within that 12-month period that put service into their name. So that what it would be is $1.95 for the credit check and $1 for every credit letter that would be sent out. So 1,000 times that, $295. I believe we put $4,000 into the budget just to have that cushion, kind of not knowing for the first year what that would look like.
There are folks that freeze their own credit through Equifax. So, they may bounce back. It's not available. You'll have to have some contingency for that.
Right. And we'd also have a contingency. There would be people who may not want their credit checked. It is supposed to be a soft hit to credit, but there's still people who don't want that. So we would be able to put into the policy, if you choose to not have that credit check done, you would be assessed X amount
So
of a deposit.
you still open the door, but that's a choice. Okay. Makes sense.
Is one of the parts of the plan of this to report to the credit bureau?
Right now, the reporting that we do to the credit bureau is just more through our collection agency. When we get to the point of sending things off to the collection agency, then it's reported to the credit bureau. So I wouldn't say like on a monthly basis, there's no plan to start doing anything like that.
Well, if the NICS, I always get it wrong, if that system is integrated with Equifax, there should be a utility that would allow on a monthly basis for us to report to the credit agencies. And the reason I say that is these payday loan places. There is one in town that is more popular than the rest because they report to the credit agency. And they also motivate their customers to pay regularly because they will use that group in order to build their credit. So that might be a real motivation to add into the plan to say, hey, look, we are going to do this and we're going to report. So paying on time will build your credit. So that might actually, if you had that feature in there, it would really, and that was explained to the new applicant, it would motivate them to pay. It would get them more engaged in their service. And if they do have to pay a deposit, then they have to, but they'd be more amenable to be getting something in return for it.
Right. And that's definitely, I haven't asked that question if we can start reporting monthly. Wasn't something that's come up, but it's something I can look into for
But
you.
I think it'd be a real good selling point for the new person on the street that I'm just out on my own. And when your customer service people who sign those people up explain that to them, they would be more engaged and understand what they're getting into and what they're risking if they don't pay. It's just a thought.
Sure.
And I think it would be a good motivator to reduce bad debt. So what will you end up doing if you have a chronic non-payer who moves from rental property and they're not going to be able to use their own, and they've gone through theirs and their wife's and their oldest kid, and now they're going to go to the younger kid? Will they even be able to sign up, or will they be able to sign up just by paying the maximum deposit?
In the same way we handle it now in that situation, is if you're coming to sign up for service, and if anyone in the household has a old bill with us, we require that to be paid. So if a husband and wife come in, and they start to fill out paperwork in the wife's name, and we find an old bill and they say, oh, we'll put it in his name, we explain both parties are, using those utility services, and we're going to need the old bill paid. So it would be similar to that. They would need to pay off an old bill, and then more than likely in that situation, they're going to be required to have a deposit based on their credit history.
Would they have to pay the old bill first?
At this point, we require them to pay the old bill in full.
I'm just thinking of the person that will, need to have it, and they've been down on their luck and they owe from the past.
Sure.
Because-
And we also try to help our customers work with different agencies in town. We've written many a letter breaking down different utility costs because different places can pay towards different things.
Right.
There are some churches that we work with regularly, and those programs also work well together. So when we can all kind of work together, a lot of times we can get those solutions for the customers as well. Great questions.
Anything else, John?
No, it's just that the whole thing seems to me like it's solving a problem that could have been solved a little differently. By having an owner who goes to a renter, if they've been on our system for 10 years and now they're renting temporarily, you should be able to check a button that says, you got credit history with us, so forget about that policy. I don't know, it just seems to me that this modification is more towards solving that weird issue than it is to address the bad debt.
I would say that solving that issue for our good paying customers is a big part of it. And then the red flag rules and the identity theft would be the other largest portion of it for me. I see our online signups increasing as time goes on, people getting more comfortable with it, and with that, being able to identify that 10-year-old's social security number, or, a deceased grandparent's social security number will become more and more important. And we have a role to play in mitigating that fraud attempt.
The only other thing I'd add is that there are people who are just plain old down on their luck. And if they got to move somewhere and they won't be able to get utilities turned on, it might be interesting to add another feature, which would be a prepay feature, which is like instead of 2.5 times, maybe 1.5 times, but when the bill comes, you got to pay it to keep us positive the whole time so that we never incur a debt. We're never extending you credit ever. We're always just getting prepaid.
And one thing that we've looked at with our AMI system, and what I guess we consider prepaid, and what I think of with prepaid is prepaid metering, where you can pay towards your bill, maybe it's $5 at a time, and you get that much electricity extended to you. So that's something that we're looking into with AMI. I'd say it's farther out. But a lot of people with those programs as well have, you don't need a utility deposit because With prepay, if you get the amount of utility service you've paid for.
What's AMI, sorry?
Our metering system, where it can bring those readings back directly.
Oh, okay.
So the new meters that we're putting in, Aclara meters that you may have heard referenced, those are all automated. We can get daily readings on them. We can get
When you
hourly
do remote
readings on them.
shutoffs? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep, they'll all be remote shut-off capable. So that's definitely something that I see coming in the future, is a prepaid service where like that, where let's say you get disconnected for non-payment and you owe $200, but you have a $400 deposit. Well, you could sign up for prepay. We take that deposit, pay off your old bill, and you have $200 credit moving forward. So I can see that as a future enhancement that we'll be able to offer, hopefully.
Is there any trend to landlords paying utilities for renters?
There is. Right now, we have situations where a landlord will leave service in their name, maybe because a tenant has an old bill or can't pay
And
the
I've done that
deposit.
before. I've had renters that needed it because they just didn't have the extra whatever.
Right. So,
Fun position to be in, but
yeah, it can be a risk for the landlord for sure when they do that. Sometimes, especially if the landlord stays on top of it, or it's a short-term sort of solution, it works out best, I see. But there are certain people who.
I
Process
didn't
that.
know if this policy or this would drive more of that. It would be my only question.
In theory, then, this would also have where if a customer is leaving it in the landlord's name and that customer and or landlord is not paying on time, it is going to be a reflection to that landlord,
Yes.
where they would see
I guess
that.
that's what I'm getting at is the landlords that are out there, are they gonna be less to take a risk or more to take that risk?
Personally, if it were me, I would be less likely to take the risk because I don't want what you are doing to affect my credit and my ability to sign for service with the Board of Public Works without having a utility deposit. Especially if I have 20 houses that I'm renting out and then I suddenly need a deposit and, a larger deposit.
so if you were to integrate a prepay policy for, in what you're doing, along with the Equifax credit system to mitigate the deposit, if you were able to collect 1.5 times the average upfront to prepay, and the AMI system was not involved, the shutoff would have to include somebody to go out there and physically shut it off.
Right. At this point, we're not equipped to do a prepayment program, just because we don't have that AMI system, as fully functional as we would like it to be. It's going to take some more planning to do that. It's something we're in more of the beginning processes of. Are you talking more making an arrangement to pay off a deposit over a period of time?
No,
Or an actual, okay.
I'm just talking about, I sign up, I don't really have any credit, and I have to put a deposit. It'd sure be nice to have another option to go ahead and pay 1.5 times the monthly fee. When the bill comes out, hopefully I'm still positive, but I got to pay it before it goes negative, and then you build up your account. That's got to be a huge integration into the billing system to be able to track that and figure out how to notify people when they're over their amount or haven't been paid. That's a lot of tracking. Yeah.
And with the prepaid system, when we get to that point, it will require those automated meters. And it will also require people to have like our Smart Hub app where they can track that. They can also put those payments on the account. So through that app, they would be able to see, oh, I have X amount of utility service left. And after a while, I would say people would get pretty good at knowing what that would get them for the day. When you're really paying attention to it, you can kind of tell, well, I need this amount for a refrigerator and this amount approximately for lights. And teenagers, turn off your lights and stop taking long showers that take all my hot water.
Good luck with that, Mom.
So the implementation of the AMI system and to do prepaid would be for electric only?
It would. There's not at this time remote capabilities for the water system. So that's another part of it that we've began looking at and looking at other utilities and what they're doing when you bill for multiple services. It can be pretty simple sounding when it's just electric, but how does that apply to the water and sewer portion as well?
Those are some of the stumbling blocks that we thought about over the whole year of thinking about how we would actually deploy that. When it comes to having a customer sign up for actually a prepaid service, we would have to have some wording in there that that customer would also agree to be remotely disconnected at any time regardless of weather conditions and that sort of thing. Currently, when we do remote cutoffs or remote shutoffs, we're still abiding by the
Cold weather.
Public Service Commission's cold weather clause or fair weather clause if it's
Are-
above or below a temperature. So those are some of the things also. And then when it comes to if you pay your water and sewer but you don't pay your electric, I'm gonna cut your electric off, or vice versa. I pay my electric but I don't pay my water and sewer. Do I cut your electric off because you're delinquent on those other two utility services? So some things that we would have to think about before that. But to
Some
answer-
that would work is cut their sewer off.
Actually, it's a cable
Stop that.
Yeah.
or their internet.
Yeah.
And that's what a
So
lot,
Or make their remote control not
They
work
had
anymore.
cable and internet service, and that's the first thing they would go do.
yeah.
It was easy.
I've seen that with a lot of, especially co-ops who offer then cable systems also. If you're behind on even your electric bill, they'll shut off the cable first because people will call and pay the bill.
Interesting.
So, but how we do that, it's definitely something I've seen more multi-service utilities start doing. So kind of seeing what they do and how we operate and how that could work for us is something that we began looking at.
You
Because I
imagine,
know that is a solution for some customers. There's some customers who, you know, if they could pay a little bit at a time and kind of watch that, it would really benefit them. And on the other side, there's customers, we have one customer who checks her usage every 2 or 3 days. She has a credit of probably at least $100 on her account at all times, but she wants to know how much she's used and what that makes her bill look like because she wants that credit ahead. So you've got both sides of it that could benefit from it.
Smart Hub's the key, mostly.
Yeah, Smart Hub's a
If-
great,
If you use that technology, it helps you out a lot
Mhm.
in planning. People, I mean, the concept of prepay is people can come up with $20 a week, but they can't come up with $100 a month. And just to watch and follow your bill and your usage.
Also, when you think about it, your cell phone, you're prepaying, or your home phone, you're actually prepaying a month in advance, whether you know it or not, because you have that hefty deposit up front as well. I'm not sure how the gas company currently does it now, but it's not a new concept. It's just sort of new to the utility industry, especially in this area.
It's something the kiosks that were installed earlier this year, or about this time last year, would also help with.
But anyway, my main concern is after you implement this policy, if somebody needs power and they're not gonna find a social security that'll work.
Well, they could always still do their deposit though.
right, it would come
So
back
nothing would
to
change on that.
sort
So
of
they would
making
still
them be honest,
You have the
to
same
use their
deposit
own.
policy.
Yeah.
As
So-
long as they don't have, $500 worth of bills out there that they haven't paid.
And then in that, we're protecting the company in the fact that we are in sort of maybe turning their arm to make them be honest in their identity and finding those old bills and getting those paid down.
It would be interesting to see what demographic is the one that causes the bad debt. That would give you some insight into putting some reasonableness into the policy. Not that that's unreasonable at all, but put more things into the policy that are going to solve, I think, the main problem, and that's bad debt. The other problem is holding other people's deposit that you don't need to. That's fine. Those people probably don't need it, but we want to provide power, get paid for it, and not have to deal with bad debt. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, so I think at the next meeting, we'll probably look over this and look over some notes and things and then we'll address it then.
We'll get the policy out to you prior to the meeting, so you'll have a chance to look at it, and you know, really even the schedule of rates and fees would be a part of it, so.
Okay.
And thank you all for your time. That's really the two items we had, and we'll be
Yeah.
happy to answer any other questions or any.
I don't have any.
No, I don't.
All right, do I hear motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All right,
All right, I call this meeting adjourned.
thanks for the pie charts. Very good.
I wanted to get those in there.